All right, welcome. I want to talk about the standings, kind of where we're at, where the predictions were on this channel. So I know this might be a little hard to see. It's kind of set back. I gotta see what it looks like on a TV and a phone once I air this. But for now, it is what it is, and we'll adjust moving forward. This little board with the magnets is the preseason predictions I had, and this is the current standings. Obviously, we'll discuss. What's it called? We're between 24 and 31 games played between all of these teams in the Eastern Conference. We're just talking about the Eastern Conference for this video. The least amount of games played is the Ottawa Senators with 24. The Blue Jackets have played 31, and the Tampa Bay Lightning have played 31 games. There are some teams. There's one team. The Buffalo Sabres have played 30 games. So going into the year, my predictions were Maple Leafs on top in the Atlantic, Sabres second, Tampa Bay third, Boston fourth. I figured the Sabres would have a good jump. They had a premier offense last year. They were starting to figure out their defense and their goaltending. I thought they finished the season pretty strong. Tampa, same roster pretty much every year. Boston without Bergeron and Krejci, assuming they would fall back a bit. Florida in fifth. Just making the playoffs. I had 5 playoff teams from the Atlantic Division making the playoffs. I don't know. These are some tough predictions going into this year. Florida, kind of a fringe playoff team, made a Stanley Cup run, showed they can play with the best of them. Maybe it gives them a little confidence going into the year. Right. Then you have Ottawa and Detroit and Montreal rounding that out. The Metropolitan. Top 3 teams I had was the New Jersey Devils, New York Rangers, and Carolina Hurricanes. Missing the playoffs, I had the Islanders, also a fringe wildcard team. The Columbus Blue Jackets, I thought were going to make a jump. Pittsburgh Penguins, Capitals, and Flyers rounding that out. Now, needless to say, that is horribly incorrect from where we're at a third of the way into the season so far. Starting off in the Atlantic, you got Boston on top again. 40 points, leading the Eastern Conference. Are they leading the league? I feel like they're not. Yeah, Vegas and the Canucks have more points than the Bruins. So leading the Eastern Conference in points. But a 741 winning or points percentage is pretty insane. They are starting to kind of look human again. They're 5-4-1 over their last 10. They're looking more pedestrian. Right, they had a very easy schedule to start the season, and even to this point, their schedule's gotten progressively harder, and we're starting to see that insane start kind of come down back to reality. Patra for the game this evening, it's December 15th, 2023. Patra this evening is a healthy scratch, whereas he was, a middle six, played some time on the top line center for the team. So it's interesting. We're starting to see some changes. I'm impressed with Montgomery and his adjustments throughout the year. I think he's done a very good job in terms of that. Next up, we got Toronto. They're in second place with 36 points, a 667 points percentage. Toronto, I think overall should make the playoffs. There's too much talent. There's too much skill. There's too much offensive firepower on that team. If you have the 4 guys, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. If they're all roughly at a point per game, you're talking about at least 2 goals every game. And some of these guys are going to be well over a point per game. Those 4 guys alone will win you your fair share of games. I do have the same concerns with them going into the playoffs. It's their defense, their team defense, and their goaltending. They are not adjusting. So I think they'll still have a great regular season as they've already had. They'll continue on. I think they could be better and a lot better, but, we'll have to wait for them to get knocked out in the playoffs potentially again to see what happens. But the way they played this year, I don't really see them making it past the first or second round depending on who their matchup is. I do see them passing Boston at some point. Boston's got a lot more difficult schedule coming up for the rest of the season. Florida in third place, 36 points, 621 points percentage. Florida, I'm not quite sure if this is sustainable. They're a pretty good team. They have guys like Matthew Tkachuk, who hasn't been scoring at a pace that he has last year or the previous couple years. So there are things that can go better for them, and there are things that are already going probably better than expected and probably unsustainable. I expect them to fall back. I think they'll still be a playoff team. They're playing like a playoff team for the most part. They're hanging in there in some really tough battles and games. I think they'll make the playoffs this year. I don't know if they'll be the 5 seed or if there will be 5 teams to come out of the Atlantic anymore because of how crazy of a start it's been. So I think Florida finishes somewhere in the top 4. Next up is Detroit, 34 points, a winning percentage or a points percentage of 58.6%. They've had a really good start. They've looked pretty human over the last 10. What are they? They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. Kind of same record as the Bruins in their last 10. I still have concerns about their goaltending. I still have concerns about their defense. I'm not 100% sold that this is a playoff team at this point. I projected them to come in second to last place. They've definitely proved me wrong in regards to that, but I do not anticipate them being in the playoffs this year. I think they missed the playoffs. I think they do better than second to last place at this point, but I don't know. I have a lot of questions about Detroit still. They haven't fully convinced me that they're a playoff team at this point. Obviously, things change throughout the year. We're only a third of the way in. Things could change, but for now, I don't see it happening. Not to say it won't or it couldn't. I'm rooting for that Detroit fan base to finally have some playoff, a team in the playoffs to cheer for and go to a playoff game. It's been a long time, but I'm not sure this is the year. I still have questions about how the roster is constructed, but we can dive into that in another video. Next up is Tampa at number 5. Vasilevsky he's had good starts and he's had not so good starts since coming back from injury. The consistent play from Vasilevsky hasn't been there, and he's been a very steady, consistent goaltender throughout his career. So that's a little concerning. We are seeing guys on the defense step up and play a little more offense and become a little more of a defensive liability. Most notably, Mikhail Sergachev hasn't been playing the defense he's capable of playing. Sergachev is very good defensively when he wants to. This year, it's been a lot of offensive-oriented play from Sergachev, and we haven't quite seen the great defense he can provide. So I have some concerns about Tampa, but I'm not overly concerned. I think they're still a playoff team. I think they still make the playoffs. They definitely have some things they need to figure out, but I have full confidence in the coach. I'm not so sure about the general manager. I have questions. If they end up needing to trade Stamkos, which, for the record, I don't see that happening. They'll find a way to re-sign Stamkos. It's probably just a very difference of opinion in terms of money, and they want to see Stamkos as he gets older throughout the year. Can he keep up this production? So I think it's more of a wait-and-see game and then negotiate. But if they trade for Stamkos, the general manager has a pretty bad history in terms of trades. I think what's the most recent, Tanner Jeannot, when they traded a bunch of draft picks for Tanner Jeannot to play on their fourth line. Third, he's a bottom 6 forward with the Lightning, so I'm not too sure that selling Stamkos is in the best interest for the team with this general manager. But John Cooper behind the bench, I have full confidence Tampa will figure it out and jump into a playoff spot. Montreal in 6, pleasant surprise. I hate Montreal, but they're kind of a fun team to watch. They're building towards the future, and they're doing it right. You can tell that they're beginning to play team defense, which is huge for rebuilding in young teams. There are games where they look like an absolute disaster, but they'll come back the next game and battle to the end, and they look good. There are some young guys. They need some refining at the NHL level, but they're doing that now. The future looks bright in Montreal, and I'm impressed that they're not in last place so far. I think they played all right. They could still end up in last. Again, they're within 3 percentage points of being in last place. But we'll see, and that's also with Ottawa only playing 24 games. Montreal's played 29 games. Buffalo's played 30. So Montreal could still very well end up in last, but we'll see. Buffalo Sabres, huge disappointment this year. I know everyone was calling for Devin Levi to be the next, Ryan Miller or Dominic Hasek, and it's a rookie goaltender. His expectations were too high, and it's tough playing behind that Buffalo Sabres defense and team. The defense isn't terrible. You still have guys like Owen Power, he's an extremely young defenseman who needs to work on some of his defensive abilities in his own zone, and that is okay because it takes defensemen a while, and he's like 19 or something. He's not going to be a perfect defenseman on the ice every single game. You can still see even Dahlin is still learning with his game to this day in his own zone, because he's another fantastic young defenseman. They're both going to be elite if you already don't consider Dahlin elite at this point. Owen Power is going to be another elite defenseman, and he's well on his way there. But so for me, the defensive core for the most part is fine. There's really not much I would change. It's the forwards not back checking, not coming back to play defense, not covering the third guy back, not covering the point. I have a lot of questions about their forwards playing defense, and I think it's really led to a lot of out of position defensive plays from the D core that have led to odd number goals. And I feel bad for the goaltenders in Buffalo. So it's something the coach really has to figure out. I think we've seen the general manager make moves to get a better defensive forward group, but that hasn't panned out on the ice just yet. So we'll see. I love Granato behind the bench. I think he's an excellent coach. But it might be, one of those things where he needs to go elsewhere and with maybe a more defensively sound team and really, really get that offense going. Maybe on like the Islanders, I can see him thriving. But the Buffalo Sabres really need to focus on defense. Maybe Dean Evason of the former Minnesota Wild is your guy. Great defensive coach. Last up, Ottawa Senators, dead last place. Again, they've played 6 less games than Buffalo, 5 less than Montreal. So when all is said and done, they're probably somewhere in the bottom 3. I don't know if they're in last place, but this is kind of surprising. They have a lot of talent. Again, the defensive play from everybody has been brutal. The goaltending, it hasn't been great, but you're not going to get good goaltender stats if the team in front of you is playing like trash. Your analytics are going to look bad. You're going to look bad. Your regular stats are going to look bad. There have been some soft goals given up. Sure, I'll give you that. But a majority of the goals, I'd say, is because the team in front of the goaltenders isn't playing even like average defensive hockey. It's well below average. I think Corpusel has been fine. I think Forsberg's been fine. I don't think they've really been all that bad in terms of their goaltending and their offense. But their defense, it needs to get better. You need to have guys back checking. It's the same with Buffalo, right? You hear it in football, defense wins you championships. Well, it's true in hockey too. You look at a lot of the Stanley Cup winners, they're very defense-oriented teams, right? So, you need more defense from your forwards. But I think those are really the only two things the Sabres and Senators are missing for the most part. If they can figure that out, they're going to win a lot more games. They're going to bring games a lot closer together and within reach. So if you're down by a goal going into the third, it's a lot more reachable to force overtime and maybe get a regulation win or an overtime win than it is if you're down by 2 or 3 going into the third period. So, all right. We're 14 minutes in. We're moving on to the Metro. All right. Metro Division on top is the New York Rangers. Now, coming into the season, I made it clear that any of these 3 teams, Devils, Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes, would be at the top of the Metro. There's too much talent on all 3 of these teams for one of these to not be on top. New York Rangers looking like a brand new team this year. Peter Laviolette, his new coaching bump, I think, has done a great job. I'm not a fan of Laviolette as a coach, but he comes in to a new organization and he does well. He kicks the team in the butt. They wake up and they perform. And it's not like a 10, 15 game performance for Laviolette. It's like a season and a half, depending on the team. It could be longer or shorter. New York Rangers are for real this year. They have a great team, great roster. It doesn't surprise me. They have 39 points. They're second place in the Eastern Conference. And I think they beat Boston earlier in the year, right? 722 points percentage, which is also just insane. The second place team, the New York Islanders, kind of surprises me how high up they are. 35 points, 625 points percentage. The Islanders are good. I don't think this is sustainable. They're giving up. their offense isn't elite. Their defense isn't elite. Their goaltending is elite. Their defense is good, but they've given up a lot more goals than you'd expect this team to. So I don't really have an explanation as to how they're up. They have a 14-7-7 record. 7 overtime losses definitely helps the points percentage and the standings and the overall points. But yeah, I don't think this is necessarily sustainable. I think there's still a fringe playoff team, a wild card team at this point. I think there's plenty of talent on this roster. You got plenty of guys. I don't want to say plenty, but you got guys who can put the puck in the net. You have likely Parise about to sign with the team in the coming weeks to a month, who was a 20-goal scorer at the age of 38 last year. He's now 39, right? But that's a little offense that can help out. Yeah, but was it the goal differential? They're a -3. They're the only team in the playoffs, and they're the only team in the playoffs, and one of 7 teams in the Atlantic and Metro that have a negative goal differential, which is a bit concerning. So I don't know. They've been hot lately. They've won 4 in a row. I think they're 7-1-2 in their last 10. We'll see how sustainable this is moving forward. But yeah, I see them. They'll probably lose a few games. I think they'll finish around the 4th or the 5th spot, if I'm just being honest, based on their play so far this year, which is about where I had them. The Flyers have been a pleasant surprise. They've looked a lot more human, and then they went back onto a hot streak in their last 10. They are 6-2-2. It's insane. So I picked the Flyers to come in last place, and I know a ton of other people picked the Flyers to be in dead last. That roster is so depleted, but they've had guys stepping up. Big shout out to Bobby Brink. He's had a very good college career, and that's beginning to translate to the NHL level. He's looked fantastic. This dude is going to be a solid top 6 NHL forward for years to come. So shout out to Bobby Brink. With Tortorella, you can't question Tortorella. He makes teams competitive, and he'll at the very least get them in the wild card mix. At the very end of the season, the team will still be in the mix in some way, shape, or form. So all the credit to Tortorella. Realistically, I think they finish around like 6th, but maybe 5th. But I don't know. They've proved everybody wrong to this point. They're essentially tied for second in their division in points, and they've played 29 games so far, which is it's just crazy. They're 16-10-3, right? So even if you consider overtime's losses, which overtime losses as just regular losses, they still have a winning record. That's just nuts. So good on you, Philly. I hope you guys lose, but also I'm happy for you. 4th place, we got the Carolina Hurricanes, 33 points. What is this? 569 points percentage. The Hurricanes, and I kind of made a prediction on this earlier in the season. I had questions about their defense. Now, I kind of had questions about their goaltending, but not really, but kind of. But my questions would contradict the results of the past couple years with this team. I'm not 100% confident in Freddie Anderson. I'm not 100% confident in Antti Ranta. And was not very confident at all in Pyotr Kochetkov. Right? So, but past results would tell you, one goes down with injury, the other steps up, and they play well, and they're always at the top of their division. It's been quite the contrary this year. Freddie Anderson out with injury. Antti Ranta hasn't looked great, and Kochetkov has looked pretty bad up in the NHL level so far. Their defense, I think there's too much emphasis on offense from their defense, and I think there's too much emphasis on their forwards to play defense. I think you need a better balance there. Brenda Moore's always been kind of a defensive first coach. They'll sacrifice points for defense, or like offensive, goals for defensive play, and they have offensive firepower. So I'm kind of surprised, but I'm kind of not surprised. You need really good goaltending if you're going to have a pretty potent offensive deep blue line. Here we are. I do think they'll bounce back. I do think scratching D'Angelo helps their defensive play. I think D'Angelo's defensive play isn't the worst I've ever seen from an offensive defenseman. I don't think he's that bad defensively, but when you have all of your defensive players trying to play offense, or at least 50% of your defense trying to play offense, it definitely leaves some open holes in your defensive core, which leaves your goaltender vulnerable and leads to goals against. I do have faith in the organization. They have cap space. They have a solid coach. They have a solid general manager. I'm confident they'll bounce back, and they're already in the playoffs now, but I think they'll be in the top three to finish the season. I'm not too concerned about that. First team out of the playoffs, which actually has a better points percentage than Carolina, is the Washington Capitals. I got questions. I don't know how they're winning games. They don't have any offense. Nobody's scoring goals. The defense has been pretty solid, which, if you asked me coming into this year, if the Capitals would have a good defense, I would probably be like, they'll be bottom half. They'll be around like 20th in the league. And no, they've been fantastic. Their goaltending's been great when it's had to be. Charlie Lindgren in net has stepped up huge. The Capitals, Ovechkin's not scoring, and nobody else has really stepped up to put the puck in the net either. So I have a lot of questions about their ability to score goals. I think that's going to hurt them in the long run. They don't have a lot of... I don't know, man. I just have questions about this team. I think they're going to start looking like the Capitals we expected. They got off to a hot start. I don't think it's sustainable. I could totally see them dropping... I don't know how much, because they have a pretty solid record so far. They have a winning record. They're 14-8-4, but they have the second worst goal differential in the entire Metro. And of the Eastern Conference, they by far have the least amount of goals scored. They have 67 goals for, and I don't think anyone else. The Canadians have 79, which is the second closest. So that should really tell you something about how anemic Washington's offense has been. Doesn't usually make for exciting hockey, but it is what it is. I'd expect Washington to jump down a bit. We got the New Jersey Devils in 6th place currently. To keep in mind, their last 10 games, it's 7-3. They're looking like the playoff Devils that we all expected. They have a very good roster top to bottom. They have very good systems in place. Their goaltending is the biggest question mark, but when you have defense and offense playing the way they are, you can get by with mediocre to subpar goaltending. This is a team that, had Hughes and Heischer both injured at the same time. Jack Hughes is back, scoring at a ridiculous rate. They had guys step up, notably Eric Holla played some first-line minutes on that team and looked fine. They weren't producing multiple points a game like they were with Jack Hughes, but at the same time, it was still, they looked all right. But they're going to come back. They're going to be in the playoff race. This team is too good to miss the playoffs. They've already started to go on a hot streak. I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. I could see them making a bit of a trade for a goaltender to try out a new goaltender. I don't know who you give up or what pieces you give up to get that goaltender. But if they're going to make a trade, that's the trade I could see them making. Next up is the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins, they've they're a funny team. In my opinion, I think they've looked better than I expected them to look this year. But they're also in 7th place out of 8 teams. They have 29 points. Not great. Their defense has played better than I expected. I think Jari's had some pretty solid games. Their offense is okay. It's definitely lower tier. They're not scoring as many goals as they want to be, but they're not super. They're not really far off pace from like league average. But I do have questions about their defense. Right, I still have questions about Erik Karlsson. That's a big contract for what? 4 more years. They're going to pay. Was it $11 million of that contract? That's insane. The defense he provides is highly questionable. He hasn't been the offensive power like workhorse he was last year so far. I don't know. I got questions. This team is wrapped up in some top-heavy cap space and older players. So moving forward, if they miss the playoffs this year, I don't see how you can expect them to make the playoffs until those contracts run out or are bought out or traded or expire. This team is kind of in a tough place, so I'm sorry. I don't know. I think they finish above the Capitals still, but yeah, I got questions. Last up, my most disappointing team, the Columbus Blue Jackets. I thought they were gonna be good. They went out and they beefed up their defense. They did a lot of little things. Juracek is up. He's playing like a top 4 defenseman because he is. Dude's a tank. But their defense has been horrible. It's not been good. It's been them and the Lightning are the only teams above 110 goals against. It's been bad. And then you got a couple teams, the Sabres and Montreal are the only other teams at 101. Everybody else is in the 90s to low 70s. The defense has been bad. The goaltending has been pretty bad. And I hate to harp on goaltenders. I think they've been all right. But, yeah, it's been brutal. The offense has been okay. They've been putting pucks in the net. There's been some concerns with Line A being a healthy scratch and Johnny Gaudreau not producing. And there's been questions up and down the lineup. Boone Jenner went out with an injury. I can't believe I'm blanking on this dude's name. Cole Sillinger, question marks. So I thought they were going to at least be a little more competitive this year. You really solidify your blue line with decent picks. I'm not talking about like Provorov and Severson being elite or even top pairing defensemen. But they're nice pieces to round out your top 6. Provorov, top 4 D-man, probably a second liner. You pair him with Juracek, boom, right? But that hasn't been the case this year. It's not been all that enjoyable to watch if you're a Columbus fan. And, the tire fire started in the offseason this year for Columbus, so I feel for Columbus fans. Columbus fans are some of the coolest hockey fans I have ever interacted with. Some of the most diehard fans. They love the team. They love hockey. They just really haven't had much to cheer for. So I'm rooting for the Blue Jackets to get back in the race. They've just been mediocre to bad for a long time. And what's the last time they made the playoffs? What was it? Tortorella was there, right? So, yeah. But it's been crazy so far. I think it's going to continue to be crazy. I think we're going to see things even out a little more. They're very different from our preseason predictions at this point. I think it'll start looking a little more similar as the season goes on, but there's always surprises every year, right? The Philadelphia Flyers could just never let up. Again, what's the record last time? 6-2-2, right? So what's that? 14 points in their last 10 games is good. That gets you into the playoffs. If they keep playing like that throughout the rest of the year, and they could with a coach like Tortorella, My prediction from last place into, I don't know, maybe they finished third, is way off. The Buffalo Sabres, I don't think, at this point, I don't think they make the playoffs this year, and I don't even think there's a chance they make the playoffs. They've been that bad. Yeah, there are questions. The Ottawa Senators, I don't know, man. I don't think 5 teams from the Atlantic make the playoffs anymore. I think it'll be 4-4 based on how the season's gone so far. So we'll see. Let me know what you guys think. Who you guys have jumping in and out of the playoffs. Obviously, this is kind of based on watching hockey. I watch a lot of hockey. I've really made it a point to watch a lot of Detroit Red Wings games this year because they got off to a hot start. I want to see how they progress. They fell off a cliff last year, roughly around this time. Maybe like a week or two earlier last year than the current date. Does that happen again this year? We'll see. But yeah, I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate you, and we'll do the Western Conference up at some time soon. Thank you guys for watching. Take care. All right.